Hello and welcome to Diecast Diaries. I'm Dan and welcome to another of my Diecast Data File videos. So the subject of tonight's video is perhaps not the first vehicle that people might think of in regards to the Second World War, but it's certainly not the last, and I think this is reflected by the fact that over the years a reasonable number of models of this vehicle have been produced by various manufacturers and in varying scales. Now technically there are actually two vehicles that I'm going to cover in this video. But as one is based on the other, and they're both very similar looking vehicles, I did think it kind of made sense to include them both in the same video. So the first of these is the M8 armoured car, known as the Greyhound. It was a 6x6 armoured car produced by Ford for the US Army. It was produced from 1943 to 1945, and just over 8,500 of them were built. It was originally conceived as a tank destroyer, but as it was only armed with a 37mm gun, this was soon realised to be completely obsolete for that role. So it entered service as an armoured reconnaissance vehicle, scout car, that kind of thing. It had quite thin armour, maximum of 25mm, and it weighed just under 7.5 tonnes in total. But it could attain a speed of 55 miles an hour, meaning it had excellent on-road mobility. It did have some downsides. Off-road mobility was not as good as we hoped, and I think that's partly due to the fact that the axles weren't evenly spaced. There's a gap between the front axle and the middle axle, and I think that could lead to the vehicle getting beached on rough terrain. Also, it had no floor armour, so it was very vulnerable to mines. But generally, certainly as a sort of scouting vehicle on road, with its high top speed and also apparently an extremely quiet vehicle, it was reasonably successful. It entered combat in Sicily in 1943 and would be used by the US Army through to the end of the war. Used to a small degree by Lend-Lease countries, mainly France, although the British also had a few as well. But it's one of those vehicles that, despite it maybe not having absolutely stellar performance in World War II, would end up having a really, really long post-war service life. It was pretty soon phased out of US Army service, not really long after the Korean War, so by the mid-50s these would pretty much be phased out of service with the Americans. But due to the fact that there were a reasonable number of them produced, they would actually be supplied to quite a number of European countries, France being the largest user. They would use them themselves up until the 60s. It was a vehicle where quite a few companies offered upgrades for them sort of during the 60s and 70s to keep them kind of relatively in line with modern vehicles. Surprisingly, even now in 2025, there are a handful of countries that still use them, in very small numbers it has to be said. Countries such as Madagascar, Guatemala, Paraguay, Cameroon and Burkina Faso all have handfuls of these still on their within their armed forces, which is pretty amazing really for a vehicle that is now over 80 years old. Now in late 43 there was an alternative version, an alternative vehicle made, which was the M20 armoured utility vehicle. Now, unfortunately, when I was trying to find a picture from a backdrop, obviously I wanted to use one that was off one of the models I'm going to show tonight, and the only one that was kind of halfway appropriate, halfway kind of sort of thing I wanted to use was of an M20, and that's actually the first vehicle I'm going to look at tonight. So one thing that's surprised me with this is a Solido M20, by the way. One of the things I do for these videos is I always look up to try and find when certain models were introduced, how long they were in production for, that kind of thing. It's been kind of relatively difficult, but one thing that surprised me is I knew that Solido had produced this model for a good number of years. I assumed it had been introduced in the 70s, which is when I thought a lot of their quite wide military range had been introduced. But according to a French website I came across, it actually said it was introduced in 1961, which was a real surprise to me. Now, this isn't the original version. This specific one is actually from 1984. It was produced as part of the 40th anniversary of D-Day range. But yeah, it said the original version of this, which I think the first version of this was actually in Free French colours. But yeah, apparently dates from 1961. So I'm still not entirely convinced by that, but as that's what the website said, that's why I'm covering this vehicle first, as that is the earliest of any of the others that I've got. So, but yeah, I don't have that original one, hence why this is the earliest one I've got, as I say, from 1984. So the only real differences, I think, between this one and the very first one are the wheels. I think the very first one actually had metal wheels and possibly rubber tyres. These are all plastic. I know that at some point Solido introduced plastic wheels with rubber tyres, but I think a lot of these there was kind of a weird chemical reaction that happened with them where the tyre would react with the plastic hub and would kind of melt the edges of the hub. So I don't think they were in use for long. And then, as I say, these all plastic tyres were introduced. Obviously, no problem at all with those. But yeah, I think the basic casting is the same. So if this is indeed a casting from 1961, I'd have to say it's very good. Admittedly, even as late as 1984, Solido weren't sort of painting any detail on them at all. They were all just kind of sprayed in olive drab all over. The decals, obviously, the couple were applied before it left the factory, and then the rest came on a separate sheet for you to apply yourselves. And then you've got the black plastic machine gun and the plastic aerials. I think possibly on the early versions, the machine gun might have been metal, but I think again would have been painted black. But other than that, it's pretty much the same as it would have been. Kind of got a very kind of simple tow bar at the back, but that's understandable. And there is a little trailer that it can tow that Solido also produced. But I have to say, despite the fact that it's in all one colour, it's very nicely moulded. So you've got anti-tank mines stored on the side, which is there's a couple of different things. There's like a storage box that later versions had, but quite a common feature of both the M20 and the M8 was storage for anti-tank mines, and it's the same on both sides. Got the headlights, the armoured covers for the driver and co-driver positions with the vision slits as well, Pioneer tools, the vents over the engine. No rear lights moulded on it, but other than that, I have to say it's pretty good. And the actual ring mount for the machine gun is really nicely done as well. Now, the M20, as I say, it was known as an armoured utility vehicle. It was kind of meant for use as like a command vehicle. Seemed to particularly find favour amongst tank destroyer platoons for the commander to use. Obviously, it's got more space inside than the original armoured car version. It had like bench seats down each side. So it could be, as I say, used for sort of command purposes, that kind of thing. So there were only, I think, just under 4,000 M20s built, as I say, as opposed to 8,500 of the normal armoured car version. But again, it was another sort of reasonably successful vehicle. Wasn't intended to be in the front line quite as much as the Greyhound, obviously scouting ahead of any kind of armoured force. But yeah, as I say, a reasonable successful vehicle, and quite surprising that Solido chose to do that. The Greyhound, as I say, produced in bigger numbers. You would have thought it would have been easier to produce with a sort of a simple round turret and the 37mm gun. But fair play to Solido for doing this and choosing the sort of more unusual vehicle to do. Solido would eventually do a Greyhound, but this was quite a bit later, and that's one of the vehicles I'll come to in a little while. But yeah, so as I say, although it's not the original one that Solido produced, which, as I say, apparently dates from the 60s, this is the 1984 one from, as I say, the D-Day 40th anniversary range. Now, I do actually have the box for this one, which is that. So there were 8 models in this range. Now, Solido actually called, as you can see from the backdrop, they called it a combat car, but it was also known as an auto mitrailleuse M20. Well, that just seems to mean machine gun vehicle, which kind of makes sense, I guess. But combat car is the name that's actually stamped on the casting. So this is a typical Solido box, I'd say, from the 40th anniversary range. You see it's got the 1944 to 1984. Sort of very quite an eye-catching limited edition, obviously. And then in there is the sheet that tells you where the separate decals are due to go. That's the box for that one. I do actually have 4 other Solido M20s. So I've also got this one. This one I think dates from the mid-80s, and I believe this was just part of the normal range. This was one I picked up second-hand, and unfortunately it is missing its machine gun. But other than that, it is exactly the same. You can see that by this point they've changed the wheels. But the casting itself is the same, just basic US Army decals on it, 5th Armoured Division. One difference that I have noticed is that this early one has a black plastic attachment on the ring mount for the 50 cal to sit in. All subsequent ones have that. So whether that was due to moulding or casting limitations at the time, I'm really not sure. But yeah, so I think this one dates from the mid-80s, and I think it will have come out in, there was a 2-tone brown coloured box that a lot of Solido military vehicles came in around that time. So that's the second one. The third one is one I've already covered in a previous video. So this was the one released in late 1994 for the 50th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge. It was a range of 14 vehicles. This one again has different wheels. I think these wheels really suit it. I think these are probably the best wheels that Solido did for the M20. But again, apart from the different transfers, it is exactly the same. Obviously, a nice invasion star on the front, and the Hell on Wheels slogan on the side. And the bridge classification, it said it needed an 8-ton bridge in order to be able to cross rivers, etc. So that's that one. And then the last one I've got is one that was released in 1995 for the 50th anniversary of VE Day. Now, unfortunately, with this one, although this is the latest one I've got, they have reverted back to these kind of simple wheels. These wheels were used by quite a number of different Solido vehicles. They look okay, but as I say, they're not as good as the ones on the previous one. But it's nice that they've given it some completely different markings. I like the large number 8 and the C on the side, and that makes it look really good. Other than that, it is exactly the same. So that's the last of the Solido M20s. Well, this is the box that one came in. So it's, as I say, 50th anniversary of VE Day. That's the photograph. See that unfortunately the cellophane's a bit damaged on this box, but that's the card that came with it. Just shows you where the decals go. As I say, typically there's like only one of them applied in the factory, and then the rest of them you had to put on yourself. Unusually, this one actually comes with a simple figure, a toy soldier with a minesweeper. And there's a handful of Solido vehicles that did. But yeah, that's the box for that. So as I say, later on Solido would eventually do a proper Greyhound version, but I'll come to that a little bit later. So the first actual model of the Greyhound that I've got, going back to the 70s, this is one of the models I thought would be the first one to feature in the video. It's actually the worst one out of all of the ones I'm going to be looking at. So this is made by the American company Tootsie Toy. And I think they're known for their kind of quite simple hollow vehicles. As you can see, there's absolutely no interior at all. It's just one, two-piece casting with the turret, and then the axles simply sort of added underneath. That's it really. I've not been able to get an exact release date for this one. All I know is that it dates from the 1970s. I find this one a bit frustrating, really. I know that it's a Tootsie Toy, so it's only ever going to be simple. But I just think with a few tiny little alterations, this could have been made to look not too bad. Proportions-wise, it looks okay. I think the worst thing of it is, apart from the yellow wheels, obviously, it would have been quite easy to change those to sort of dark green plastic, would be if they'd just covered the wheels up. I think that would have looked really good. Maybe sort of giving it an olive drab scheming instead of the green and brown, but I suppose that at least makes it look more interesting. They've got around the fact that the real vehicle, has a completely open top turret by just doing this mesh, but that's forgivable, really. I think it doesn't look too bad, to be honest. Gun looks nice and in proportion. Not sure what this is supposed to be at the back, unless it's just something to aid you turning the turret. But yeah, it's, as I say, definitely one of the biggest, if not the biggest, of all the models I've got to have a look at tonight. But yeah, definitely the worst or the least accurate. So as I say, that was produced at some point in the 1970s. And another vehicle from the 1970s is this one, made by the Hong Kong company Play Art. So they did a couple of different versions of this. They did this one in this kind of very weird sort of sage green, I suppose you might call it. They did another one that was in a more normal looking olive drab colour. For the size of it, it's not bad. Again, the proportions of the vehicle look alright. The one thing that is way oversized is the gun. I think that looks a bit too big, but again, it's probably due to kind of size limitations. And at least the gun does move on this one. Obviously, the turret does turn as well. I'm hoping that's supposed to be the gun, the wheel for elevating or traversing the gun, and not the actual steering wheels. That would be a little bit odd, but it's a shame they did it in red plastic. Other than that, you've got like the little white stars on either side of the turret and US Army. Now, obviously, I don't have the box for that one. That's one that was just picked up second hand, but I do have another vehicle from the same range. This is the Ford GPA amphibious Jeep. So that's the kind of box it would have been. It would have come in. Obviously, it was the same box used for the civilian vehicles as well as military. But you see, yeah, there you go, US M8 Scout car. So that would have come in a box like that. And then another vehicle from the 1970s and another one from a Hong Kong manufacturer is this one made by Tin Toys. Now, this was part of a series of 4 armoured cars, and they did well as the Greyhound, they did a British Daimler Dingo, a British Saladin, and a Russian BTR-40, which I do have the other three as well. Came with just a simple blister card in like an orange and yellow colour with pictures of all four vehicles in the range on it. But again, it's pretty basic, but for the size of vehicle, I don't think it's bad. So it's plastic underneath, plastic wheels, but all the top bit's metal. Again, they've kind of simulated the open top to it, which I think's worked quite well. Gun looks relatively in proportion, I would say. Obviously, on these kind of simple models, they've not bothered with any kind of machine guns, but then not all versions of the M8 carried a machine gun. There were some that just had it would have had a coaxial one mounted next to the 37mm, but not all of them had the 50 cal on the top of the turret, so it is kind of accurate to do it like this. But yeah, so that's one made by Tintoy. So all these date from the 1970s, but unfortunately I don't have an exact date as to when these were produced, and obviously for how long for as well. Next vehicle I've got, this is the smallest out of any that I've got to for this video. This is made by the Italian company Micro Model. Now, I actually have the box for this one. Now, apparently, Micro Model, there we go, so it's made to look a bit like a crate. So you've got a picture of the vehicle there, so you can see, although this one doesn't have a ring mount, whereas all M20s would tend to, it's not broken from the model. You can see it never actually came with one. They've obviously, I think due to the size, decided that would be too fragile and to just miss it off. But yeah, they call it a combat car. Now, what I've learnt in reading a little bit about Micro Model is that they tended to copy existing models from other manufacturers, but just do them in a small size. And the reason I think that they've decided to do the M20 and not the M8 is because at that time, probably one of the few models of it that would have been out would have been the Solido one. And I think that's also reflected in the fact that they call it a combat car, as that's what Solido referred to it as. But yeah, nice little model this, you can see made in Italy. I have got a couple of other Micro models. One of them's a Daimler Mark I armoured car, so that would be another one that's kind of copied off, in that case, a Dinky Toys model. But I think for the size, I don't think that's bad at all. I say forgive the fact that they've not given it a ring mount. It's all metal, which I think is really good, but just got plastic wheels. But yeah, it's quite a nice little one. So that's the one made by Micro Model. So then we move forward quite a number of years, actually, and it's actually 2005. Now, in the early couple of years prior to that, Corgi had brought out quite a large range of military vehicles and aircraft under the name Corgi Showcase. These were all made to kind of a fit-the-box scale. They were all done in the same size boxes and were just made as big as possible. They were grouped together in various little collections, so there was one for D-Day, Desert Storm, Falklands War, El Alamein, Battle of Britain, all things like that. And they tended to include, each collection tended to include 4 vehicles or aircraft, and you could either buy them separately or you could buy all 4 of them together in a gift set. Now in 2005, they introduced some more D-Day related ones. There was a collection called Sword Beach, and in that they featured a Greyhound. So this is actually one that's in British markings. Now the Americans never really kind of got into armoured cars in the same way as say that the British and the Germans did. Americans, they never really found favour in the US Army, but the British really liked armoured cars, and I think the fact that we only had a few Greyhounds is because we produced enough armoured cars ourselves. But we did use them. So this is actually, to show you the box. So that's the box it came in. So it says Sword Beach on the front there, D-Day 60th Anniversary Series. So I think that actually dates it from 2004. And you can see it says Greyhound Armoured Car, first Derbyshire Yeomanry. You get a little data card in the box there. Yeah, they were all done in this same size box, just with different details according to what collection it was from. Now this one, I can't really work out what scale it is. I suppose it can't be far off, kind of 172, 176. I actually think, certainly for the size, this is one of the better models of the Greyhound out there. It's all die-cast, a little bit of plastic under the chassis there, but all this bit is die-cast. The barrel's plastic, and obviously the 50 cal's plastic. The 50 cal is possibly slightly oversized, but I don't think looks too bad, and that is movable as well. Obviously the turret turns. Gun does elevate and depress, and you can see they've actually included the coaxial 30 cal as well. But yeah, you can move the 50 cal round as well. The wheels look really good and look really close to the wheels on the real vehicle. they've actually given it, despite the scale, the proper style tow hitch at the back. It's got the rear lights, which is, as I say, something that the Toledo one doesn't have. Admittedly, we are talking a more modern model. Obviously, the headlights are a bit more simplified, but I'd say you can kind of forgive that. But yeah, I think that's a really nice model. And as I say, the fact they've actually done one in British markings is really rare. So yes, that's the Corgi Showcase Sword Beach Greyhound armoured car. Now I actually have 4 others from this range. So as well as a Sword Beach collection, there was also an Omaha Beach collection. Now this might have been one that was only really available in the States. I don't remember this one being, I got it off eBay, I don't really remember it, seeing it in the shops or anything like that. I got it off eBay and it was unboxed. Now you can see this one, they've maybe gone slightly over the top with the weathering, obviously given it, because it's obviously driven up the beach, lots of sand weathering, particularly underneath. Other than that, it's a nice one, just in very basic US Army markings. In fact, so basic, it doesn't even have a star, which is unusual, just the serial number on the side. But other than that, identical to the first one. Then they released, again, another one that I think may only have been released in the States, is they did a Battle of the Bulge collection. This is my favourite. I actually got 4 of these Corgi Greyhounds. This one's definitely my favourite. As I mentioned in a previous video I did on the Toledo Battle of the Bulge 50th anniversary range that included this M20, which I did back in December. The Battle of the Bulge, it's the land battle I have the biggest interest in. I don't know why, I have no connection to it, but it's just something about it just really find really interesting. So any vehicles, I try and collect as many models as possible of vehicles from that battle. And when I saw that Corgi had done one in this winter whitewash camouflage, it was one I really wanted to get. Again, it was an eBay purchase, so I think it did come from abroad. I can't remember exactly where. Now you can see this one is a later style one that has the sort of pannier on the side for storage, as opposed to the anti-tank mines. And a lot of the sort of later ones that enter service had this feature. But yeah, that's my favourite of those. And then much more recently, in the last sort of few years, Corgi have started to bring out some more. They've started to reuse these castings again, but given them new liveries. And the Greyhound was one of them. And they've actually released it in this really eye-catching free French scheme. You can see it's got the nice tricolour on the side and the name Bonne Nouvelle 20, it looks like. Really nice finish, just no weathering on this one, just kind of plain olive drab, but it looks really good. No pintle, no sort of tow hook on this one, which is a bit strange. And the other real downside of this model, and I think it seems to affect all of them, is the fact that the name is reversed on the back. It's in like mirror writing, which is really strange. It got to have been a factory error, but as I say, from the pictures I've seen online, it seems to affect all of them, which is a real shame. But thankfully, it's only on the one side, so long as you just play it that way around, it's not too bad. So that's the last of those that I've got. There is one other Corgi one that I'm aware of. One of the collections that Corgi did was Vehicles and Aircraft of the US Marine Corps. And in that one, they just did a very simple green one with USMC on it. Again, I'm pretty sure that was one that was only available in the States. But other than that, that's the 4 Corgi Showcase Greyhound armoured cars. And then from 2005, we finally have Toledo, or should I say more accurately, its sister company Verem, doing a Greyhound armoured car. So they've used the hull from the M20 and then altered the casting by filling it in and doing a nice job of the circular open top turret. You can see the gun does move slightly, but unfortunately the breech in the gun inside the turret doesn't move as well. There's only limited movement with the gun, to be fair. Apart from that, I do think it's a really nice model, this one, and this being a Verem one is reflected in the fact that it's got a little bit more weathering than your average Toledo model, although you can see the fact that the wheels were obviously like that when they sprayed the sort of dust or mud weathering on it, because the wheels were only half covered. Also the fact that it's got little accessories on, like the plastic bedrolls and things like that. Now this one actually came with a little trailer. It's the same trailer that was often towed by Jeeps in the Toledo line, but it was a trailer. I've seen plenty of photographs of Greyhounds and M20s towing these trailers that had a few supplies in, extra ammo or rations or whatever for the crew. So it is kind of perfectly accurate that it would tow one of these. And again, this is nicely weathered. So Toledo themselves did do a Greyhound. I don't have that one. Obviously, it is exactly the same casting, but I think it's got the basic wheels like the couple of the M20s. Obviously, it doesn't have the plastic accessories on, I don't think. But it's a nice enough model. But yeah, I really do like this this Veren one. Just surprising that it took them so long to do what I would say is the more interesting of the two vehicles, with it having like a proper gun turret, and certainly the more widely used of the two. But yeah, so they have at least done one. But other than that, the detail is the same. We've still got no kind of rear lights. Still got the same simple tow hook, even though this dates from, well, quite a few years after the original M20. But that's a nice one. That's the Veren one. I'll just put that with its trailer over there. And then from about 2005 or 2006, there was a range of 1 to 43 scale military vehicles released under the name of Schuco Edison. They seem to be made in Italy, even though Schuco are obviously a German company. So I'm thinking the models may have been made in Italy and then marketed or sold under the Schuco branding. I'm not really sure. I know Edison is an Italian company, so maybe it was a joint venture. I'm not sure. They did a fair range of 1 to 43 scale military vehicles, and it was a bit of a mixture between World War II and post-war up to sort of current vehicles. But again, they chose to do an M20 and not an M8. And unusually, this is the only model I've got of any of the range that doesn't have the wheel covers in place. Now, on the real vehicle, the wheel covers were completely removable. There's numerous photographs of these in action that either have the front ones missing, the rear ones missing, or as is the case with this one, all of them missing. Sometimes I suppose it would have aided maintenance, obviously easier access to the wheels, things like that. I much prefer the vehicle with the covers in place. I don't mind it with all of them removed, but what I do think looks odd is when they either have the front ones missing and the rear ones in place, or vice versa. But yeah, interesting that Schuco Edison decided to do it this way. Also, one other unusual thing with this one is the fact that it actually has rear view mirrors. Now, I'm thinking that they maybe used a restored one to base the model on. And I know one feature, and not just of these, but numerous military vehicles that are in private ownership, if they want to drive them on the road, they have to make some slight little alterations to them, such as fitting little discrete indicators, because of course the real vehicles don't have them. And then anything that's, for an armoured vehicle, anything that aids visibility as you're driving it round would obviously be a help. I don't think these kind of mirrors were ever fitted to the vehicle in actual combat service, but it's okay. It certainly makes it look a bit different anyway. So yeah, that's quite an unusual model. And as I say, you can see this one's actually got some nice detail inside. You've got some rifles in a rack there. You've got the nicely sort of painted fire extinguisher. You can see the bench seats. Yeah, I think that one looks really nice. I say a bit of an unusual one. And nice that the Pioneer tools are kind of painted separately as well, kind of makes them stand out nicer. So that was made by Schuco Edison. Now, I do have the box for this one. They were all done in these same boxes. The only difference was some of the slightly larger vehicles, they were in a slightly bigger box, but it was still the same camouflage pattern on. It's like a plastic display case inside. And you can see it just says M20 Armoured Utility Car, US 1944, military series 1 to 43. There's not a huge amount of detail on it, and then underneath you can see it's got the Schuco logo and then another label saying obviously what the vehicle is. But it does mention a company in Italy as well. But yeah, they were quite an interesting range. I only managed to get a few of these, but really pleased that they included the M20. Then we moved down in scale to 1 to 72. In about 2009, Hobbymaster, who had started to produce quite a reasonable range of 1 to 72 scale military vehicles, they first introduced a Greyhound. Now, as to be expected from a company like Hobbymaster, and obviously a model released as late as 2009, the detail on these is really good. And this is kind of the first way you can get like the full detail inside the open top turret. We've got the machine gun ring on the top, similar to what the M20 has. We've got really nicely detailed headlights. This one's obviously one with the anti-tank mines on the side. This particular one, I have 3 of the M8, and then they also, I think in the same year, released an M20 as well, again of which I've got 3 of. So this particular one is one of the first ones that came out, and it represents a vehicle from Operation Cobra, which was the big breakout from Normandy in July of 44. These would have been in the vanguard of that, sort of racing across France, trying to sort of link up with other units, trying to sort of like capture the Germans in a big pincer movement. But you can see there's some really nice detail with this one. You've got the coaxial machine gun there, to the 50 cal on the top. Didn't include aerials, but you have at least got the aerial bases, but the aerials would obviously have been really sort of delicate on something like this. Got nice detail around the engine covers, but yeah, and the proper style tow hook at the back. But yeah, for the size, certainly, these are really nice, and they are mostly die-cast. There is, a reasonable sort of plastic in these as well, but they do still have die-cast in them, so they do have a nice little bit of weight to them. But well, yes, that's the first of the Hobbymaster Greyhounds. The next one I've got is another Battle of the Bulge related vehicle. This one's unusual in that it doesn't have anything mounted in between the axles at all. It doesn't have the anti-tank mines or the storage pannier. But again, it is accurate. There were some, I think, earlier ones that didn't have anything. This one's obviously meant to represent one that's been hastily painted in winter whitewash. They've obviously left the green around the star to make the stars stand out. But I like the fact that they've done it. It made it look like it's been really hastily applied, just leaving it kind of rough around the star, and that looks really good. It has still got some unit markings on there and on the front. But yeah, a nice contrast and another vehicle for my Battle of the Bulge collection. And then the last Greyhound that I've got from Hobbymaster is a nice Free French one. So again, it is a World War II vehicle. It's not one from the post-war French army, but it's a nice looking one. That nice splash of colour with the French ones, without having the tricolour on the side. You can see it's actually, interestingly, I think it's supposed to be the same vehicle. Yeah, it's actually, I've just realised, it's the same vehicle as the Corgi one, which is interesting. And obviously, with this one, the writing's the right way around. But yeah, just noticed that. So that's the Free French one. As I say, they did also do an M20. So this is the first one I think that was released. So this is a US Army one from the Normandy campaign. So obviously the same underneath as the Greyhound, but then obviously just altered the top with the open compartment. Nice considering the scale of the vehicle that they've also included the little fire extinguisher, although of course it's a lot simpler on this one than on the 1:43 scale one. But it's another nice one, that. Then I have another Free French one. So again, not quite as sort of colourful markings. Obviously got the tricolour, but it's much, much smaller. And this one does also have invasion stars on it as well. Got the Cross of Lorraine on the front, like a lot of Free French vehicles were marked with, and the French style number plate. And again, obviously extinguisher inside. That's a nice one. And then the last of the Hobbymaster M20s that I've got is another Ardennes related one. So very similar to the Greyhound, but obviously just the M20, but again done in the nice winter whitewash scheme. And again, certain bits left green like it would have been on the real vehicle, just to make some of the markings stand out. Now, that's not obviously all the ones that Hobbymaster did. There are other sort of versions that they've done. They've done a couple of other Operation Cobra Greyhounds, but they're very similar looking to the one I've got, so I'm quite happy with those as examples from that range. The last two vehicles I've got are from a company called Atlas Editions, which I believe are a French company, and this was from a part work they did, which I think came out around about 2012. It's one I did. It originally came out in France, and it was a range of 1:43 scale vehicles, and I think every couple of weeks you got a model and a little booklet that had details about the vehicle. I saw these vehicles appearing on eBay, usually in France, managed to get a couple, and then the collection was available in the UK. So I subscribed to it, and two of the vehicles in it were, firstly, the Greyhound armoured car. These are really nice 1:43 scale vehicles, mixture of die-cast and plastic. There's a reasonable bit of weight, but they've got nice rubber tyres. Obviously, for this scale, really accurate looking wheels. This obviously is a later war one with the storage pannier in the middle. It's actually got the tyre pressure information on the side there. 12th Armoured Division, according to this. Bridge classification, I think. No, turret doesn't. It is all fixed in this. Obviously, these are just meant as models. But again, you've got the tow at the back, the rear lights, and I suppose you could say the aerials, they've made an attempt at them, but obviously they're too thick for the real ones, but you can understand why. And they've got the tow cable stretching the length of the vehicle as well. One unusual thing they've done with this is the turrets. I'm not quite sure, I've seen a real one that looked like that. Whether that's to get out of them doing the interior turret detail, I'm not sure. But luckily, the fact it's got the machine gun ring on the top doesn't attract too much attention to that. Well, that's the Greyhound armoured car. Now, these moulds were also used by a company called Eagle Moss, which is another company that's done a lot of part work related models. And they released a lot of the vehicles that Atlas Editions had done, but in different colour schemes. They did the Greyhound, but it's actually in a green and brown US Army, green and black camouflage US Army scheme, which is accurate. It was from another part of the campaign in France following D-Day. They're more difficult to get, I think. I don't seem to find them as often, but it certainly provides an interesting contrast. That's the Atlas Editions M8 Greyhound. And then the last model for tonight is the M20. So again, it's very similar to the Greyhound, but obviously just with the differences up on top. This one unusually has very unusual. In fact, that it's got like the full markings there on the wheel covers there for the tyre pressure. I would have to say the bed rolls don't look terribly convincing in this kind of bright green colour, and unfortunately, despite it being a 1:43 scale, this one doesn't have the extinguisher on the inside of the compartment. Other than that, it's pretty nice. Very small star. Obviously, the star was often used as an aiming point by German gunners, so certainly later in the war, the star would be seen in either smaller sizes or not at all, or kind of hastily painted out. And then it's weird that it's only on one side at the rear, but I'm guessing it is based on a real vehicle. So that's the Atlas Editions M20. Now again, Eagle Moss released this one again, and their version was in Free French colours. Now these, I do have the boxes for these. Again, they were all in very similar boxes. This is the one for the M8. They all came with this little data card, or certificate of authenticity rather. As you can see, it's all in French. Then you've got details on the back, again, all in French, plus a nice period photo of the vehicle. And then same applies for the M20. So you've got Ford M20 armoured utility car, and then again period photo of one, and of course details, but again obviously in French. So that's all of the models I've got. There are a couple of others out there. There's another 1:72 scale one made by IXO or Altea. It's very similar to the Hobbymaster one, but it is a different mould. And then there are other variations of models that I've already covered in here. There are various other ones from Solido. As I mentioned, there are other ones from the Hobbymaster range, and at least one other from Corgi Showcase. Plus Solido have done their own version of the Verem Greyhound. But that's most of them, I would say, and I just thought it was a decent enough collection to do a video on. So as I say, it's probably not the first vehicle that you think of when you think of World War II ones, but it is, as you can see, a pretty widely used vehicle, and certainly its use post-war meant that these have been around for a good number of years, and even after they passed out of military use, some police forces ended up taking them on as kind of riot control or SWAT vehicles, and there's a turretless M8 that actually famously appears in Die Hard trying to storm Nakatomi Plaza. I'm pleased to say that from what I've read, the vehicle used in the film has since been restored back to its original configuration. But it's nice that one features, in a film kind of as prominent as that. But yeah, so that's my models of the M8 Greyhound and the M20 armoured utility vehicle. So a slightly different vehicle, as I say, perhaps not one of the absolutely dead famous ones, such as the Willys Jeep or the Sherman tank, which are vehicles I am intending doing this kind of video on at some point in the future, but I thought this would be an interesting one in the meantime. So, thanks for sticking with me for that one. I know it's been a slightly longer video than I've done over the past few weeks, but As I say, I'm not sure what I've got coming up over the next sort of couple of videos. As I said, there is a Matchbox unboxing video I'm planning on doing. But in the meantime, please do like, share, subscribe and comment, and I will see you all very soon. Bye.